What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm dealing with the Volkswagen. Terry just came and told me about a junkyard over in Fayetteville that I did not know about. So we did a search and searched their inventory, and they have a Beetle that's the exact same color as that one. So I'm gonna go see if they've got the fender and the bumper so that I can fix that. I'm gonna work on replacing or pulling the engine later today, but since it's Sunday, we're gonna go over there and see if we can get the bumper and the fender, and then we're gonna go get some parts for the Lexus. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. I'll let you know how I like this junkyard. I thought it was another pull apart, but it's not. You pull your own parts, but it's a different junkyard, so I didn't know it even existed. All right, guys, me and Terry just got back from the junkyard, or we're actually on our way home from the junkyard. Managed to pick up a matching rear bumper and fenders for the Beetle, and got a new convertible top handle. Terry got a brand new carpet for the IS and some other miscellaneous pieces, so I think we scored pretty good, and it was all pretty cheap. Pretty happy with that junkyard. I may go back there again. So yeah, when I pick back up, I'll be back at the house. I'll show you what I scored, and then I'll start removing the engine out of the car. All right, guys, so what I wound up getting at the junkyard is an original color rear fender, rear bumper, and the other rear fender. So I'm going to be able to repair this back corner. It's held in with like 60 freaking bolts, but it's pretty easy to replace. So I'll show that in a different video. But right now I'm working on pulling the motor out. So I've already taken the front end off, which you saw in the last video. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna remove the front bumper frame. So I'm gonna remove those two bolts right there, the bottom one and this top one, and then these four that are right here. So there's another one down there. And okay, this side only has 3. This side has 3 as well. Okay, so there's 3 here, 3 there, and the whole bumper comes off. Then once you get to that point, we'll disconnect the radiator and the AC condenser and unbolt this bolt right here and this bolt right here, and the whole core support should come off. All right, after you remove the 2 bolts at the top, there's 4 T30 screws holding the AC condenser and radiator to the core support. They're right here and up underneath this cover right there. And then there's a hole in this one for it, and then right there, this one. So you take those bolts out, and then the core support will separate from the radiator, and then you just got to disconnect your wiring connector that's going to the after run coolant pump. So you just disconnect it, and then you can disconnect right here, and the whole core support's ready to come off now. So there, all I did was disconnected the after run coolant pump, and then the main harness connector for the after run coolant pump and for the hood switch. So then the whole core support comes off. Now we can disconnect the radiator and swing the AC compressor or condenser out of the way. Okay, so I went ahead and removed the battery, which is a 14mm for the clamp, and then pulled it out, and then I took the battery cover that went around the back corner off. Took the cover off of here. The way it works is this is the cover for the battery, and then you pull up on this cover, and then it comes out. So, and then you can pull the whole cover out from around the battery after the battery's out, and you disconnect those because that's holding this wire to it. Then pulled the whole air box. This one was easy because all the bolts because the rubber's broken around the bolts, but that's one of the bolts. That's the other bolt up here, and then it's got a little dummy plug that it sits into in the corner, and then it's hooked into the intake right here. So now that that's off, I'm going to disconnect these plastic tubes so I don't break them. So to disconnect them, you just squeeze where the treads are, and then they come off. All right, but I'm going to disconnect these so that they don't get broken. So this is your secondary air injection, and it hooks up to the front of the air intake. And you, like I said, you just squeeze right there and pull. But now that's off, I'm going to disconnect the radiator hose right here, and I'm going to disconnect the lower radiator hose right here. I'm going to take all those hoses with the radiator when I take it off. All right, so in order to remove the radiator from the AC condenser, you have 4 T30 Torx bit bolts holding it in. My after-run coolant pump broke. The nipple broke off right there. So don't do that on yours. But I disconnected the lower radiator hose from here. After-run coolant pump broke right there. And then disconnected the upper hose from right up here. So now I've got a free open shot of the engine. I can unbolt the AC compressor and swing all the AC components over to the passenger side of the car. And then I'm going to disconnect the power steering pump, and I'm going to move it back over to the driver's side of the car. And then I'll have free access to the front of the motor. I can start disconnecting the intake, disconnecting the exhaust, pulling the battery tray, disconnecting the CV axles and getting this thing ready to pull. Disconnect wiring, disconnect the fuel lines. But I'll cover all that stuff as I go. All right, guys, so I went ahead and disconnected this entire hose assembly right here. So what I did is pushed in these little clips on each one, and they're color coded. You got a black one, brown one, white one, black, blue, white, black, blue, and then white. And then this goes to the coolant tank. This goes to this steel line back here. This end goes to the throttle body, and this end goes to the purge valve up in here, right there. So that entire assembly can come out, get out of the car. Now we've got access to the belts and everything. Now I went ahead and removed the throttle body hose. It goes from here down to your intercooler. There's a clamp down here and a screw clamp up here. It may be a compression clamp up here, but on mine it was a screw clamp. So now that I have that out of the way, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the tensioner, get the belt off of here. Then I'm gonna unbolt the AC compressor, and I should be able to swing the entire AC system over here to the side. Then I'm gonna disconnect the power steering pump, and I should be able to slide all the power steering system over to this side, over to the driver's side. Then the only thing that I should have left to do on the front side of the motor is just remove the battery tray and make sure there's no wiring or anything hooked up on the front end of the motor. Go ahead and pull this hose so that the engine doesn't hit it when it's coming out. But I should be able to get all this stuff swung out of the way. The only thing that's really going to be in my way 100% is this. So I may have to go up. I don't know how I'm going to do this because the AC might get in my way. That one AC line may get in my way, because I was planning on coming forward and then picking it up, but I may not be able to do that because of that AC line. I really don't want to break the AC system open. I may not have a choice though, so I'll have to wait and see how that progresses. But hopefully I can get this out without breaking the AC system apart. But then I'll have to disconnect the shifter linkage, which is right here, right there, and right there. Disconnect that bracket that's holding the shifter linkage to the transmission, and disconnect the motor mount, that motor mount. Disconnect the CV axle down there. Disconnect the slave cylinder, which is right here, and get this thing ready to come out of here. I'm gonna have to disconnect the exhaust, disconnect the brake booster. So there's a lot of stuff that I still have to disconnect, but we'll get there. So now I just removed the tensioner. It's those 3 13mm bolts right there. They're bolted in directly underneath there. You can see them right there. So now I'm going to take the alternator off, which is that bolt right there, and then another one down there. Take both of those off. Then I'm going to pull the AC compressor and the power steering pump. All right, 2 bolts holding the alternator on are full thread, pretty long bolts. So you can see how long they are. But now the alternator should come off. I've disconnected the power wire on the back. The connector, the excite wire connector doesn't want to disconnect, so I'm going to have to try and finagle the connector off of there. And then I need to unbolt the clamp for the wire from the back of the alternator. All right, now that I have the AC compressor removed, it was mounted right here and right here, 2 16mm bolts, and then there's a spacer on the front one to get it up out to where the front of the compressor is. Now I need to take out this bolt and that bolt, and I'll be able to remove the power steering pump. Okay, so I got the power steering system removed. It's sitting over here tucked out of the way. AC system is removed and it's sitting over to the side. I still think this is going to cause me a problem when I try to pull the motor, but we'll see. But there was actually 3 volts on the front of the AC or the power steering pump. You got one there, and one there, and then there's one on the back. And you have to pull the pulley off. So in order to pull the pulley off, I stuck a 5mm Allen wrench through the pulley to sit against this metal part, and then used a 6mm Allen wrench to break the bolts loose and took the pulley off. So there's the pulley right there. So now that I've got all that off, I'm gonna work on disconnecting this wiring that's running across the front of the engine. So I'll get this all out of the way, get it disconnected and pulled back over to where the battery box is. And then I'll work on disconnecting the wiring up here, getting it tucked over to where the battery box is, and then I'll start working underneath. All right, so I've got the entire wiring harness pulled over to the side of the car. All of that's disconnected from the front of the engine, so I had to disconnect. There's a connector right behind here. There's the sensor right there. There's a connector here. There's a connector down here behind this hose. You can see it right there. Then you got to disconnect the throttle body, disconnect the cam position sensor, all the fuel injectors, and then all that pulls through coolant temperature sensor, all the coil packs, disconnect the ground from right here, disconnect the wiring going to the sensor back here, the reverse sensor, and there's a couple other, but you disconnect all that and then feed all of it back through, and then you can pull it back. There's a ground wire that's hooked to that stud right there on the transmission. Now I went ahead and disconnected the ends of the shifter cables, and the way these work is these are just spring-loaded clips. So let me see if I can video it. But so you just pick up on that part. I'll try and show you how this works. So you pick up on that piece right there, and then it slides forward. So there's a pin, you can see the pin sitting in the dead center of it. So all you're doing is getting that pin to slide off of the top of there and then slide it out of the way. So once you do that, both of the shifter cables just pull off, and then there's 2 bolts holding the shifter bracket on. It's a 13 here and a 13 back there. All right, so now I got the shift cables disconnected. I removed the slave cylinder and put it up here. There's 2 13mm bolts, one right there and one right there. Kind of hard to get to with the shifter. You have to keep moving the shifter to get wherever you need to get to. But now that that's out, I believe I've got everything off the top of the motor, with the exception of the motor mounts. So I'm gonna have to jack the car up and start working on the bottom side now. So this is basically where the engine stands right now. Power steering pump's over, AC compressor's over, and then the whole front of the motor's tore apart. So now I gotta get it up in the air, get the CV axles off of it, and get the engine ready to pull. I almost forgot that on the top side you need to disconnect the 2 heater hoses back here. So they just have spring clips on them. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to show them, but you can see those spring clips in there. It's just like the radiator hose. So you just pop that clip out and then pull the hose off. And then I also have to disconnect the overflow tank for the coolant right here. And then that should be everything on the top side of the motor. All right, guys, so I went ahead and disconnected both CV axles and the exhaust manifold from the downpipe. The exhaust nuts are 17mm. The lower engine mount that mounts from the bottom of the transmission. There's 2 bolts that bolt to the engine and transmission, and then there's 2 bolts that bolt to the subframe. The 2 bolts that go to the subframe are 13 millimeter. The 2 that go to the engine and transmission are 16 millimeter. The CV axles are a triple square. Just break all those loose, take them all separate. And now the engine is actually ready to come out. All I got to do is disconnect the 2 engine mounts that are on the top, and I'll be ready to pull the motor. Now, I ordered a gantry from Harbor Freight, a 1-ton gantry crane. And I got the trolley and the chain fall. Bought it all the same day on Labor Day. There was a 25% off coupon for 1 item. So I had my son buy the chain fall. I had Terry buy the trolley. And then I bought the gantry crane. And the freaking store didn't have it in stock, or I don't know what the whole deal is, but I'm kind of pissed off about it. But it's been 2 weeks. Still don't have the crane. My engine stand, or my engine lift, is underneath the subframe for the Genesis. And I was trying not to move that because once this Beetle's done, I'm going to jump back on tearing the Veloster apart and getting it going. So, I don't know. I'm kind of aggravated right now with the fact that I don't have that gantry crane yet. But I'm going to see about pulling this motor out now, because like I said, the only bolts that I have left to take out are for the engine mount on the timing belt side, and then the transmission mount. Once I take those out, the whole motor's ready to come out. So I called Harbor Freight yesterday. They said they still hadn't heard anything. They won't know for a couple more days. So I think I'm going to have to go get my engine lift out from underneath the subframe for the Genesis, get it over here so I can get this engine out, because I need to get this car done before I start tearing the Veloster apart. I mean, I can go ahead and start tearing the Veloster apart, but I really want to have this as a spare car before I start tearing the Veloster apart, because right now the Veloster is my spare car. So we'll just have to see what happens. All right, guys, engine's out. So what I wound up doing, and I hate that I didn't video it, but it is what it is. So what I wound up doing was picking it up just enough to where I could get both of the motor mounts out. So I removed that motor mount and that motor mount completely. Once I was able to pick it up high enough to get those out, I rotated the engine like 45 degrees so that the transmission was closer to the front. Picked it up a little bit, kept rotating it until I got the transmission past this bracket. Once I was able to do that, then I was able to clear the AC line and just pull the engine and transmission back out of here at a 45. I never picked the engine up higher than where it is right now. So that's as high as I picked the engine up the whole time I was trying to pull it out. So, but now the engine and transmission are out. I'm going to go ahead and break loose all the transmission mounting bolts and pull the transmission from the engine and get the engine mounted to an engine stand. Now that I've removed all the bolts around the entire perimeter of the transmission's ready to come off. Just grab it and kind of shake it and it'll come off. Come on, you're gonna make me a liar. All right, there we go. So there's the transmission off of it. Now, usually in order to mount it onto an engine stand, you have to remove the pressure plate, flywheel, and clutch. So I'll see if that's the case. So I believe I found out what's wrong with the engine. I'm not 100% certain. I'm just guessing on what I'm seeing. But it looks like this timing belt is relatively new. Looks like the tensioner is new. Looks like the water pump is relatively new. So it looks like somebody recently did a timing change on our timing belt service on this, but it is 4 teeth off. So the mark for the cam is, or the mark for the timing on the cam cover is right here, and then the mark on the cam is right here. So you can see they're off a pretty significant amount, 4, maybe 5 teeth. This is lined up where it's supposed to be. I don't have the cover on there or the pulley on there to show you, but I'll throw it up there just so that you can see what I'm talking about. So the way this works, and I'm hoping that this will show up in the camera, but on this cover at the top, so this cover sits in there like this. Yeah, so that cover sits in there like this. There's a dent in the cover right there, and that's the 0 mark. All right, and then there's a tick in the pulley right there, and that's the 0 mark for the pulley. So if I put that cover back on there and put the pulley back on there, it'll show that that's at 0, and this is off by about 5 teeth. So I'm going to reset the timing. I think the damage is already done. I think the valves are shot in cylinder 1, but I'm going to readjust the timing, and then I'm going to check it for compression and see if I get compression on cylinder 1. All right, guys, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. The next video will be tearing the engine down and figuring out why there's no compression on cylinder 1. I was going to get into it on this video, but it's already long enough, so I'm just going to end it here. I'll get into tear down in the next video, like I said. I'm also hoping to be able to post an update on Terry's IS300. We're running up to Home Depot to go pick up some bolts and some spacers, and we'll be back within like 30 minutes. So I'm hoping we'll be able to do an update on that video, on that car as well today. So hope to have 2 videos posted this weekend, since I didn't post one last weekend. But like always, if this video helped you out in any way, please like, comment, share, subscribe, let your friends see what I'm doing, and I hope to catch you in the next video. And like I said previously, I'm not going to work on the Veloster again until the Beetle is running and registered and insured. So it'll probably be another week and a half before I work on the Beetle. So I'll get to the Veloster as soon as I get the Beetle done, but I have to get the Beetle done first. So I hope y'all understand.